I guess we're live. So it's Blerding While Dad. Again, it's Brian. Playing around with some new different things on my setup. On today's episode, this stream, I think I'm going to jump into a little bit of old head frustration, without the old head angst, regarding hip hop, and talk about how this kind of fits into the washed universe. So get to y'all after the intro. Peace. All right, so we're back. This is Blerding While Dad. Today we talk about all things related, blurred culture and parent culture, and being a black blurred parent, and being a little bit older than I was yesterday. So today's episode kind of hit me because a couple of months ago I did live stream with a couple of friends, and we talked about the concept of being washed. And it was a follow up to a podcast episode I did about the concept of being washed, and how being washed is something that you throw your arms around and embrace, and just kind of get used to the idea that you're no longer competing with some aesthetic or whatnot. You kind of decided on your own aesthetic, and that's what you're going with until um, you decide to change it, or until time finally catches up with you. And so we started a conversation about hip hop. Specifically, generally it was music, but specifically we're talking about hip hop. And one of the things that got brought up is the degradation in quality. Um, you know, that one of the well, not just one, but a couple of brothers felt who were on the live stream. Degradation of quality in hip hop comparatively, then versus now. And I wanted to dive into that one. I'm not one of these old heads. I used to be really belligerent about it and get up in people's faces and talk about all the stuff I thought was wrong with modern music and stuff like that. And then I sat down and actually listened to some newer stuff, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't my aesthetic. It wasn't something that I personally would drive around listening to, but from a standpoint of, okay, technically, is this bad? No, it's not. And so it kind of hit me with something, because I know a lot of times on the internet people are tempted to say anything I don't like is garbage, as opposed to saying I that's not for me. And I think we don't draw that distinction enough, where we say this thing is not for me versus this thing is bad, and we blur the lines. And so sometimes things that we don't like we call trash or garbage or whatnot, where it's really just not. You're not the core audience. It's not really made for you. um it doesn't really tick your boxes, which is fine, but technically, is it bad? No, not really. That can describe the entire Drake phenomenon for me, because I can look at Drake and be like, yo, that's not for me. Is it bad technically? Nah. But is it something that uh aligns with me and what I like to listen to? Nah. So it's not for me. And I think a lot of old heads to let it be known chitlins are trash. I feel you, bro. They ain't for me. They for somebody else. What's up, Richard? Yeah, they ain't for me. It's for somebody else. Which I would almost be more comfortable taking on that and saying, you know what, this thing isn't for me. It's for somebody else, and we pass it along. I mean, and here's the reality. We've all encountered trash music. I used to work in the radio station, bro, in college, and one we used to get a lot of independent artists, and hopefully his brother's not watching this, because um, it was objectively the worst music I've ever heard. Man, he was really working hard, pushing it. When I was working the radio station, this dude was calling every single day, acting as his own A&R, um, calling every single day to try to get us to play it. Bro's name was Frederico, and it was the worst music ever. It was a brother down from Texas, I believe, and it was a mismatch of a bunch of different genres. And they even said it. It's a mix between blues and hip hop and jazz and country and scat and metal and a lot of other things. And sometimes, genre bending is cool. You get a lot of different flavors, some unique takes on things. With cuisine, sometimes you mix different styles and they come out good. And then sometimes you mix different styles and it's bad. And that's kind of what we got with Frederico. But it was objectively bad. Everybody who listened to it thought it was bad. There was not one person, out of our broad group of people in the radio station that listened to his album and thought it was good or worth listening to. That's objectively bad. It wasn't competent. It wasn't competently done. You know, And unfortunately or unfortunately to him, dude was able to press an album and distribute it to a lot of other college radio stations, and it wasn't competently put together. The mastering was off. You could hear stuff in the background. It was just a lot of things that was, technically wrong with Frederico. Sorry, I got the sniffles a little bit, so if I sound stuffy, that's what it is. But so there's a difference between objectively bad and this ain't for me. And I think that's what we fall into. That's the conversation we fall into a lot. When I'm talking older hits, I'm talking about cast born late 70s, early 80s. You grew up in a very distinct culture, a very specific time in hip hop. Now, let me talk about my entry into this hip hop thing. My first tape that I remember that I bought on my own was Run DMC Tougher Than Leather. I had a bunch of hip hop records that my mom had bought me, but the one I bought on my own was Run DMC Tougher Than Leather, and I had that on my little boom box or whatnot. You can tell me shit. But I was always listening to hip hop. I grew up with it. It kind of permeated. It was kind of the soundtrack of my life. And being the soundtrack of my life, I'm protective over it. And I will be the first one to admit it. I am very protective over it because it's something that informed a lot of aspects of my life. A lot of my memories um, are based on what I was listening to at the time in my life. What album was in the stereo or whatnot. Um, as a matter of fact, it got to the point where stumbled across this rabbit hole on YouTube last week, and I'm going through it, and they're like, um, you know, it was a game that was on YouTube. Name this artist, and bonus points if you can name the producer and year it dropped. And I'm sitting there arguing with this YouTube video about when certain albums dropped and who the producers were because I knew and it was wrong in the video, and I die on that hill. But that being said, that was my entry into hip hop. Now, as my taste started shaping with hip hop, I realized that I didn't connect as much with a lot of early 80s rappers. And when I'm talking early 80s, I mean, like, I wasn't a big Houdini fan. Um, BDP was good for me, but KRS One stuff, when he broke solo, Boom Bap was cool. The self titled album was cool, but I'll be the first to come on here and admit that some of KS One's albums are unlistenable outside of the signature tracks that you know. And so I'm not one of these cats that loves everything that's old school and rejects everything that's new school. But one of the things I did want to discuss, and one of the things I think that is kind of driving the wedge in the debate in hip hop is one, the marginalization of older heads. Hip hop has always been a young man's game, but um, the reason why it's always been a young man's game is because it's always been young men playing it. And so now we have generation gaps in hip hop where we got like three or four generations that are in hip hop and they're all competing for airtime. And it being a young man's sport and also being where um, it's an industry. It's really folded into the industry. Um, the people that run the industry, old white guys, are deciding that the only viable artists that are worth major support are younger artists. And a lot of older artists are left out in the lurch. And some of them haven't learned the skills and tricks that the younger artists use to increase their visibility. Some of them have. I know specifically Redman has done something where he drops videos for people to react to, you know, on YouTube. And I know Slap the Shit Out You was one of those things, he dropped a couple years ago. It was really bait for the reactors to react to. Run the Jewels has been really good at that, where they drop videos and then they don't really go after the people that are reacting to their videos. They allow them to kind of live. And that's really grown their audience. And so some of those tricks, I know that, um, that's been the rift where, you know, younger cats are like, oh, these old cats is just hating and whoop doing this, that, and the third. And a lot of it is we're trying to find our place in it and find the artists that, talk about some of the stuff that we can relate to too. But we also want them to get equal airtime. And I know that that's not going to be a reality in the way hip hop is set up. I mean, the way popular music's kind of set up, it's always drifted hedged towards younger folk. The difference is, um, in popular music, and I've said this 1,000 times, I'll say it 1,000 more times. Um, Bon Jovi been playing the same music since the '90s, bro. Their fans still come out to see them and support them. They ain't really changed, and they've been dropping music consistently. They have their sound and their fans like their sound and they come out and buy their records and support them in concert tickets and stuff. They support them based on that specific sound. Hip hop is one of the it's not the only genre that does this, but it's one of the lead ones where you get to a certain age and hip hop is just done with you, more or less. And a lot of it is driven by the corporate side of things, where the corporate side says that this old artist is irrelevant, and henceforth, since they're older and they have a sound that they're holding on to, they need to be discarded. Now, I've listened to some stuff that was truly dated. Um, I don't know if back in the days, a lot of my heads out here who used to buy Source magazine, there was this dude who was in Redman's camp. It was Human Wreck, and I waited on that album for 6 years, bro. Like 6 years it was in the advertising the source. And when I finally got that album, it was terrible. It was bad. It was dated. I got it in the early 2000s and the album was supposed to drop in like 1996. And even if it dropped in 1996, it would have been bad. But the sound was dated. So I understand sounding dated versus, a old head trying to emulate a new style as opposed to updating their old style and bring it into a modern era. I think there is a way to do that without sounding totally out of place. I forgot a couple years ago, I heard, or not a couple years ago, earlier this year, I heard Ludacris on one of these young cats tracks, and it was a total styles clash. And Luda sounded, it didn't sound right, and it sounded dated, and Luda wasn't really bringing anything. He was bringing some very vanilla ass bars to the mix, and it just didn't work out right. And a lot of younger cats clowned him, and rightfully so. He delivered a weak performance on one of these new kids things, and it was him trying to emulate too much what the young kid was doing, and it wasn't exactly updating his style. He was just mimicking what this young dude was doing in his own style. It was bad. It was a bad experiment. So there's a difference between the sounding dated and updating your style and keeping your sound, staying true to your sound. I think the fickleness of hip hop is, um, we don't really appreciate the pioneers of the art, and they get thrown to the wayside. And we're basically treating a lot of these older rappers the same way that jazz players got played, bro. Um, yeah, we're playing a lot of these rappers like jazz players got played, bro. Um, where they changed the landscape of music, and then when everybody started copying the innovative stuff that they were doing, the industry couldn't throw them away fast enough and was content to allow them to die penniless. And that's what's happening in hip hop. The older MCs are struggling because, and I don't want to say struggling like they're all destitute and everything, because that's obviously not the case. But The older MCs are kind of expected to just go out and wander off into the desert and die off. And that's the sad part about what's happening with it. And like I said, it's what's happened. It's what happened with blues. Is what happened with jazz. Something that happens to black artists. You know, constantly we hear about Madonna being, for a long time, Madonna was the queen of reinventing herself, but that same grace wasn't given to Janet. Anyway, so Bon Jovi been playing the same music since forever, and their fans still ride with them. I know that people will make fun of you if you're an old school hip hop head for going out and buying your favorite artist's new record. You'll get clowned for it. And the people that are clowning you are your age, they're the same age you are. They expect that you are just supposed to full on embrace all this new stuff. Now, I don't mind the new stuff and I'll listen to it, but that's not what I choose to listen to when I'm at the gym or if I'm driving around. I'll lend the ear to it, hear what's new, hear what's out there. If there's stuff I like, I keep it. If it's stuff that's not for me, then I leave it. I put it on the side and move on with life. I think one of the things that we're seeing in terms of hip hop, and it's not just hip hop, but that's what we're focusing on, is the democratization of hip hop. What I mean by that, back in the days, and I'm not talking about the late '70s and when hip hop was truly in its infancy. I'm talking about back in the days after '80s, '90s, and stuff. To get on, you had to have a level of proficiency, or you had to be down with somebody else proficient, and you had to kind of start carving out your own little niche in hip hop. And you had to carve out the niche and people had to come out and find you. But there was so much politics and BS with the labels, ripping people off, and things like that. It wasn't an easy industry to get into. And yeah, some people snuck through the back door, you know, and some people had a lot of success sneaking through the back door. Let's be honest. Let's be real transparent. There were a lot of whack rappers in the '90s that had really no business in the industry. They were a gimmick, and as gimmick status went, they got their little gimmick clout and got up out the game. But it wasn't as easy to get in hip hop, for better or worse. And I think a lot of it was for worse because there's a lot of dope MCs that were trying to break in that never really got in the '90s and early 2000s. There's a lot of dope MCs that got left by the wayside because they didn't have the connections to get in, or they didn't have the sound that rich white dude was looking for that was on the pop radio station. So the democratization of hip hop has been actually a good thing, where a kid with a computer with downloadable software and a microphone can make a track and get some SoundCloud fame or get some YouTube fame and parlay that into a career for themselves. The problem is, since it's easier to get into, you're finding people that aren't as technically proficient sliding their way into it, and they catch up real quick. And there's some real undiscovered talent that's emerging on a day to day basis with these younger cats, where they're actually bringing something new to the game. But what's happening is the sound that kind of took over, the SoundCloud rappers and all that stuff, the sound that kind of took over that's what the corporate side of the industry latched onto. And so now everybody has to sound a specific way when they come out in order to blow up. And I think that's the bad side of the democratization of it, because yeah, anybody can get in, but in order to get on where you got the big deals and everything, um, it's almost like people are getting punished into all sounding the same. And it's a really weird thing. Um, my wife and I were just kind of discussing this, where we watch a lot of these reaction YouTubers. They react to '90s hip hop, old school hip hop, if you will. One of the things that you note when these young boys and girls are reacting to '90s, '80s, '90s, early 2000s era hip hop, one of the things that a lot of them say is, "Bro, what's dope is everybody sounds different. Everybody sounds unique." Because Back in those days, in order to be the next big thing, you had to come up with a sound that was super unique. You had to sound different. You had to present stuff in a different way. Some of it was gimmicky, some of it was, the afros. You had a lot of those, the afros coming out, and it's like, technically they were okay as MCs, but there was a gimmick attached to it. Um, but that's something that a lot of these younger cats say. They talk about when you watch these younger reactors reacting to stuff, they say, "Damn, back then everybody had their own style, their own flow. The beats were put together in specific ways where it didn't all sound homogenized." And I think one of the things with the democratization of entry into music is there's a lot of homogenization that goes on. Hip hop is one aspect of it, but I've seen it in pop music too, where a lot of these, young pop singers, they sound like all the other little pop singers, and then by extension they sound like a lot of these rappers. And so everybody sounds like everybody else. And it's hard to differentiate between who's doing what, because what's different gets punished. If it doesn't change the world, then it gets punished. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if that made sense or not. If it's not different enough nowadays, it gets punished. And when I'm saying different enough, it's got to be a radical departure from what's being presented. Otherwise, cast is turning their nose up at it, or the powers that be in the industry will not give you support, and you got to go find your own support. Now, the democratization allows these young artists to really go find their audience. And as a marketer, I applaud that. I applaud them finding their niche, their target audience, and selling directly to them. That's dope. I love that. The downside of that is, um, especially when somebody blows up big, the industry gets a hold of it and says, okay, we're going to assume that everybody matches the same demo as your target audience. And everybody that comes who kind of sounds similar kind of gets roped into what the biggest person doing that sound does. Let me know if I'm going too far on that one. And as a result, um, you still get the same sound coming out. Now, we had our clones in the 90s. For the Fushnikins, there was a Daz Effects, chicken versus the egg kind of thing. But, and then you had Lords of the Underground, who were kind of similar to Daz Effects and kind of similar to the Fushnikins, but really kind of their own thing. So there was a lot of play there, but it wasn't you had to sound exactly the same. And I think that's what it is. I think it's one of those things where we've kind of reached the McDonald's era of hip hop, where all the music has been kind of stamped and pressed, and it's all seasoned and cooked the same way, so that the listener gets the similar experience across artists. And at that point where that becomes a bar for what's said as good, things become more disposable. When something's a commodity, it no longer holds as much value. It's not as individually for the seller, it's not as individually as valuable as when you have a unique offering that has a very strong audience that really wants that unique thing. Once it becomes a commodity, the price falls, the price falls, and you could get it anywhere. So if you can get it anywhere, then what you're offering over here isn't any better than what I can get over there. And it ends up becoming a race to the bottom. And I think that's kind of what the area that we're in. Now, I do think that there's opportunities for these young boys and girls to change the game. But I also think this is where I'm going to put my old head hat on. I think there's a responsibility on these kids to decide, I'm not going to come out and sound like blah. I'm not going to come out and try to sound like Cash Doll. I'm not going to come out and try to sound like whoever. I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to find my audience. And I think that's going to be the challenge of hip hop moving forward. Like I said, I'm washed. I like what I like, and I'm comfortable with what I like. This morning I went to the gym. I'm listening to Run the Jewels. I'm listening to Ghetto Boys. I'm listening to a mix. a little mixtape that I put together of some newer artists or whatnot that I'm kind of feeling. But at the same time, I still gotta listen to Griselda. I still gotta listen to Griselda. I still gotta listen to the stuff I like. And so I'm in a good place now with the music where I can listen to mix of new school, mix of old school, and be content with it. If your diet is only new school, I fear that you might end up being averse to new sounds because your ears get so accustomed to the rhythm and cadence of the new stuff that's dominating the airwaves. Because when you listen to it, it does some of this stuff sounds interchangeable. And in the 90s, being interchangeable was like the death kiss. Like if you sounded like everybody else, then you didn't really have anywhere to stand on. And the concept of biting, that was enough to end your career. If somebody said you were biting off of them, that was a fight, bro. That was a fight. I remember the entire beef. If we're talking about recently, the beef between 3 6 Mafia and Bone was the fact that people thought that the chatter was that Bone was biting 3 6 Mafia style. That's where the beef came from, and it got real, and we saw it manifest on that stage because some of the cast is still holding the grudge, right? The entire Nas Biggie drama came, and it's not the entire scope of it, but there was a part of it where, if you guys listen to Raekwon's Only Built for Cuban Links, the entire skit is where him and Ghostface are talking about, niggas bit Nas and shit, where they're talking about Nas had a picture of himself as a kid on his album, and then Biggie dropped a picture of his baby picture, and they're like, well, he bit that, whether he did or not. That's what the perception was, and that kind of fed into the whole beef. And then it didn't help with one life, one love, so there can only be one king, as a reaction to the source putting Biggie on the cover saying the king of New York. Nas dropped the line, there's one life, one love, so there can only be one king. That was a diss. The idea of biting somebody else's style or taking any part of their style was something that was a transgression in hip hop. And now it doesn't seem like it's as big of a deal. And I don't mind it. I mean, showing that, somebody before that you are emulating somebody that you enjoy, artist that you enjoy, is not necessarily a bad thing. And a lot of these younger cats have figured that out, that we show love to the people that birthed our styles, and then they show love back to us, and that's pretty cool. But at the same time, it does hurt the music where the push for uniqueness isn't as strong. And like I said, you have people that tried to ride the uniqueness wave, and it kind of, it kind of crashed around them. And other people got swallowed up by it, where they were actually bringing something truly unique to it, and the burden of trying to create something unique ended up driving them out of the industry. See Andre 3000. See what happened with Diggable Planets. Um, where they're constantly trying to top the unique offering that they created, and they feel like they may never recapture the magic, so they go do something else. I know bro from Diggable Planets has been doing stuff. His dad was a fantastic jazz musician, and so he's dug deeper. Butterflies dug deeper into um the jazz side of things, and it's kind of dope. Andre 3000 has even said, where do I fit in this industry? What do I do? What am I going to do? He doesn't want to come out with anything that's the old sound, but he doesn't feel confident enough to do something that's new sound. And so he's kind of adrift. And, when you're somebody who wants to kind of push and see where your creativity goes, that can be a hell. That can be a very unique kind of hell. Now, it's a multi-million-dollar hell because he has a lot of money to kind of be in a creative rut. But I mean, it is what it is, especially if you're a creative person and that's your entire life. You don't want to create anything that's going to damage your legacy if at the end of the day the creativity and the creative output is more important than what it generates for you. So there are people that have been punished by trying to be too unique in hip hop. um, because it's a they feel like they always have to top themselves. I remember watching the Fugees. Um, I remember the Nappy Heads remix. That was the first, that was the very first time I had really heard them, and I went back and listened to the other stuff. And then around that time, as I was getting familiar with the first album, the second album dropped, and the score blew up, and everybody's like, "Oh wow, this is different. This is amazing." And that was kind of the beginning of the end. I know Wyclef had a fantastic solo career. Praz was Praz, and um, Lauren, I don't know. Lauren, people started loving Lauren because of her ability to sing, and Lauren kind of just moved away from hip hop and started singing full time, and then her personal demons kind of overtook everything, and it destroyed the Fugees. It almost flamed her career out because her fans, she kept, no showing her fans and things like that. But when I look at Lauren Hill, I see somebody who's kind of in that mold where they're always trying to one up what they were doing, and the creative control and being the artist is more important than anything else. So where this goes in terms of the Washed Chronicles, for me, like I said, I'm comfortable with where I'm at right now. I struggled with it. I struggled with it in my 30s. I did. I struggled with the concept of getting older, and it manifested in a couple of different ways. Um, First, it manifested in me doggedly holding on to the stuff that I grew up with, the music I grew up with, and stuff like that, and a strong resistance against anything new from a hip hop standpoint. Two, um, it the second part of it was a radical embrace of everything that's new, and diving way into the underground to find the next big thing, and almost becoming obsessed with that to the point where I had an entire phone that was just filled with mixtapes that I downloaded off that piff, looking for the next big thing coming up. Now I'm at a point where I like what I like. If something new comes along that catches my ear, I'm all for it. If I don't like it, I say it's not for me and keep it pushing. That's what's dope about being washed. Being washed up, where you're comfortable and you don't put that external pressure on yourself to front and posture for anybody. I'm not competing with anybody. I like what I like. And I don't really have to explain my likes and dislikes to people. From a clothing standpoint, it saved me a lot of money because I don't really have to go out and figure out what the new style is. I just update the style that I'm currently rocking to make sure that it stays kind of contemporary, but it's still comfortable with some. It's still comfortable in what I want to wear. I'm not competing about labels and all that other bullshit that a lot of people that are my age that are still chasing that youth movement do. I don't obsess about that stuff. So it's kind of a dope thing. It's the most liberating feeling I've had since high school, to be quite honest with you. Because my freshman year, I was really caught up into what people thought about me and how I dressed and stuff. And then by sophomore year, I didn't give a shit anymore, and I wore what I wore, and that just kind of became my aesthetic, and I didn't have to worry as much about it. It was a liberating feeling when you just stop giving a shit. It's dope. And that's when my high school life kind of took a turn from the outsider to finding my crew, to finding my voice, and finding out who I was. Um, and it's almost like a rebirth being washed. It's almost like a rebirth for me because, I'm a dad. Um, I still love hip hop. I still love comic books. I still love comic book movies. I still love action movies. I love sci-fi. I love video games and all the other stuff. I like what I like. And I ain't gonna put on airs for anybody. I ain't gonna front for nobody. That's dope. And some people have been this comfortable their whole life. And for y'all, I say congratulations. But I know that there's a lot of cats out there that are, and cats that are younger than me. And that's kind of where this goes. People that are younger than me that are coming up on these years age, and they're pushing hard against it by diving headlong back into doing young people shit and acting like young people and trying to stay current and trendy with this group of kids that's coming up behind you, and feeling like you're losing your sense of self in the mix. Stop. Figure out where you're comfortable at and try to stay there as much as you can, and keep, stay, of course, stay with stuff that may, you update it moderately. I might swap out the super baggy sweatpants for some joggers. I could rock with that, but I'm never losing the t-shirts and stuff like that. I'm never losing the comic book shirts and stuff like that. I'm not losing the hoodies or any of the other stuff. That's still part of what I wear. Stop trying to chase these kids and chasing their trends, and set your own trends, because the beauty of being washed is you are no longer beholden to what's popular. You can just do you. That's comfort right there, bro. From a hip hop standpoint, um, I like what I like. And I know I'm a broken record on this. I like the music, I like the MCs I like the artists I like. If somebody comes along that's new, I'll give them a shot. I give them the same shot everybody else, and then I make the decision. Is this for me? If it's for me, I rock with it. If it ain't for me, I move on with life. Life is too short to be playing these little kids games with people, of me trying to force myself to like something I don't like. But it's also too short to be getting upset that the thing that wasn't made for me doesn't really make me happy. It doesn't give me joy. That it, it's I'm too old. Life is too short to be sitting up here expecting that music and things that really aren't made for you, with you as a target audience in mind, getting upset that it's not for you. Not for you. Put it down, move on. I don't have time to be angry about hip hop right now, because I got enough hip hop that I like. I got decades of stuff I can go back and listen to. And there's new stuff coming out every single day that I actually like. So for me to be mad about it, I don't have time for it. If I don't like it, I turn the channel. But what I don't do is get mad and get myself so wound up and talk about this is trash, everything sucks, and all other stuff. Because once you start doing that, then it feeds into this really, it gives you kind of this negative air about aura, I should say, a negative aura about everything that's new and popular, and you unilaterally are going to hate everything new that comes out, or you're going to instantly reject it because the stuff before you wasn't feeling. I don't have time for it. There's too much stuff that I like out in the world to be focused on the shit that I don't like. And if I don't like it, I put it away and move on, you know? And sometimes out of a curiosity, I'll listen to something I think I don't like, or something I think that's not for me, and I'm pleasantly surprised. And that's dope too. But when you start doing that, you start turning into one of them bitter old heads that I hate all the modern hip hop. Then you turn into that dude that hates all the new movies, and you turn into that dude that hates all the new comic books. And I got a whole different episode about how hard nerds are to please. I don't want to turn into that. I don't want to spend so much time harping on the shit I don't like that I ignore the things I do like. And I don't feel like having useless arguments online about, you know, 90s era is this and 90s era is that and 2000 era is absolute garbage. I'll let other people have that conversation. I'll let y'all do that purist, that hip hop purist shit, uh, wherever you want to do it. I'm not doing it. And the other side to it is, um, if you're going to ask me what I like, I'm going to tell you why I like it and why I don't connect with this other stuff. I'm gonna tell you why, but that's not me hating it. That's just me saying this is why I don't really connect with this thing. And I think a lot of times we're so used to this is the last thing I'll say. I think social media has conditioned us to instantly being agreed with, regardless of what stance we take. And so for some people, they've lived their entire life and never really ran into a dissenting opinion, and they don't know what the hell to do with it. And instead of taking a dissenting opinion and say, yeah, I don't agree, and moving on, it turns into a death ground for them, and they'll sit there and argue about pointless shit for a long time. And I've been pulled into that rabbit hole. I still get pulled into that rabbit hole occasionally, but people get caught up in that a lot. And I think it creates this weird cascade of I can't really enjoy anything because I spend too much time thinking about the shit of the aspects of it that I don't enjoy. Thank y'all for listening to me rant on this live stream. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to be cutting this down for a podcast, so you'll be hearing this again. I did want to, and some little bit of housekeeping before I exit. I did want to redo the recast T'Challa thing because every day there's new things coming out about the Black Panther 2 movie. And I want to make sure that the information I put out there is accurate before I do a full-blown video about my thoughts on recast T'Challa. The recast T'Challa thing is spun out a more interesting conversation that I want to have. And so this is probably going to be my next live stream at some point in time. And I'll probably do a live stream and a video about this thing. I think that we get caught up, and there's something to be said for liking and being a fan of a property, entertainment franchise, and us owning that property. And I think nerd culture has a very difficult time drawing that line, where if you're a rabid fan of, let's say, Star Wars, let's say you're a rabid fan of Star Wars. For some of us, it is very difficult to conceptualize the fact that just because I'm a fan of this property does not mean that I have ownership of that property and I can dictate the direction the creative direction that property goes. And I'm realizing that with the internet, it's kind of made it more severe. And I see it with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I see it with the DC Cinematic Universe. I see it with a lot of these comic book cinematic universes. But then you also see it with the anime world too. Live adaptations. And I'll be transparent. A lot of this is born from the reaction to Cowboy Bebop, the reaction to Sonic, the Snyder Cut, how people are being with Black Panther, how people have been with the Marvel TV shows and Marvel movies, how people are being with the DC shows and movies, where these fan bases think that just because they're fans of this property, it gives them carte blanche to think that they have the right to dictate how it goes from a creative standpoint. And so that's going to be the next episode I do, where we kind of get it out and about. We start drilling down into what line do we draw between being a fan of said property versus feeling like you have a degree of ownership over that property and you can dictate the creative direction it goes. So that's going to be the next thing I do. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to be cutting these videos down, and you're going to start seeing them in other places. So the live stream is going to get recut and going to be chopped up. And I also wanted to get into, there's two things I wanted to try out. One, I want to try out the reaction world. And so, but I'm gonna do it with a different spin. I'm not gonna sit up here and pretend like I ain't never heard some of these albums before, seen these movies before. I'm gonna do breakdowns more or less, talking about some of the thematic elements in them and things like that. And then I also, I do want to do deeper dives into properties that I'm fascinated with. I want to do a deeper dive into the IDW Transformer universe. I want to do a deeper dive into the Dark Tower universe. I want to have deeper discussions about that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of content you're going to start seeing. Plus, we're going to talk parenting stuff. We're going to talk about growing older. We're going to talk about grown Black folk business. I'll holler at y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. This is Blerding While Dad. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.